Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a review of Divine Rivals. If you are new here, I did a TBR Jar Picks My September Reads, and this was one of the books on my list. So it is also the second book that I have read and finished in the month of September. Let's get into a review. If you are not familiar with this book, it took TikTok by storm a couple of months ago. I was seeing it everywhere, and honestly, I am super surprised that I didn't rush right out and read it. I actually picked this book up in my last book haul, which I think may have been in June or July, so I have been holding on to it since then, and I have finally read it and cannot wait to share about it. This book is a fantasy romance and follows our main characters Roman and Iris, who are both journalists and who are both competing for the same promotional position at their job. Iris has an extremely tough home life. She is kind of taking care of her mom, who deals with addiction and who is also dealing with some depression. And Iris herself is also dealing with depression because she is dealing with her brother being out to war on the front lines and not having heard from him for months. So she is sad, she is anxious, she is super worried, and now she is trying to take care of her mom, who's not really functioning that well. Now, this is a fantasy after all. So the war that Iris's brother is helping to fight in is not your standard war. This is a war between two gods who are using their powers to enlist people into their forces and who are kind of battling for superior power. And the people that are going into the war, some of them want to be there and some of them are just kind of led in by the powers of these two gods who are at war. When Iris was younger, her and her brother would write letters to each other and pass them under the door so that they could read them, and it was just kind of this fun thing that they did together. And since she is missing him so much and has no way to get in contact with him, she starts to write letters and put them under her closet door just as something comforting to do and to try and convince herself that she's still able to communicate with her brother. But the really interesting thing starts to happen when the letters that she is passing under her closet door vanish. It turns out that these letters are going to Iris's handsome, cold-hearted rival coworker Roman. Roman anonymously writes back to Iris and passes it under the door, and they have this type of magical connection where they can pass letters to each other, but keep in mind that Iris does not know who is responding to her and especially does not know that it's Roman. Iris goes through something extremely terrible and traumatic and feels like she has nothing left to hold her in the city, so she signs up for a new position, and that position is a war correspondent, which basically is like a non-biased war reporter, and she goes out to the front lines to write stories about what's happening, and it's not to convince people to join either side of the war, it's to just let people in the city know what's going on and that this is getting closer to their homes whether they wanted to or not. And Iris is also hoping that by being out there, she is one step closer to finding her brother. That's it. No more details for you because I do not want to spoil this book, but wow, let's get into my thoughts. The first thing that I want to say is how much I adore our main characters. So we have Iris, who is an 18-year-old, fiercely strong woman who is taking care of her mom, working to try and support her and her mom while worrying about her missing brother. She is so loyal and protective of her family. I mean, how could we not love her? As for Roman, I have to say he starts off in the book a little bit obnoxious, but naturally that is just how these things go. We come to realize that there is so much more going on with him than we could have ever anticipated, and honestly it was not things that I would have guessed while reading the book, so I really appreciated that these were some new things and they caught me by surprise and it kept the characters and the plot interesting. And also we come to see Roman become so protective over Iris, and it is just a really incredible character development. We also have some really great supporting characters in this book. They all played a very important role, and I think that they're also going to play a very important role in the sequel, and I love that. I dislike when a book has characters that just feel like they're there to be there and they don't really play a part in the plot. I mean, it has its time and place, but I prefer when the characters all play a significant role in the book, and I felt like this book did that really well. I loved the other characters in this book and want to know what's going to happen to them, what did happen to them, are they going to be in the sequel, and I just loved all of them. The writing of this book was absolutely beautiful in a way that I didn't expect. It kept my attention and also touched on things that I think a lot of people can relate to, like anxiety and depression, but was just so interesting. And it actually really reminded me of The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, if you've read that. Now, I did want to reiterate that we are dealing with some very heavy topics in this book, and I feel like we don't really see that from a lot of viral TikTok books, but in this one, we are dealing with death and grief and war and depression and some really, really deep topics that you will feel once you are reading the book, but I really loved that. Again, I feel like this is different from what we have seen go viral on TikTok. This is not your normal cutesy romance. There's a lot going on in this book. I mean, I guess I should clarify that a lot of fantasy books do have war in them, but this one felt different. This was like boots on the ground, fighting, combat type of war rather than magical fae-based war. There are magical aspects of the war and of the characters, but the war itself is very much like an army style war. For anyone wondering about the world building in this book, it is super easy to follow and very beginner friendly. The author kind of dives right into letting you know about the gods and their powers and setting the world, but it is not hard to follow at all. So we have now touched on the major themes of the book. We have touched on the characters. We have touched on the world building. We need to discuss one of the most important aspects of this book, which is the romance. Now, this was a very refreshing read for me because I had just finished Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I do have a review if you are looking for my full thoughts on that one, but to be honest, it fell a little bit flat for me. I didn't enjoy the romance, I didn't enjoy the characters, so going into this one was kind of a breath of fresh air. The characters had incredible development and chemistry, and it was well paced, and I just loved the development. I will add that this book is not spicy, so if you are looking for something spicy, this isn't it, but I would still highly recommend it as a fantasy romance to read. We also really need to discuss the cliffhanger. Now, don't worry, I am not going to spoil the book for you, but oh my gosh, it has an incredible cliffhanger. Like, it's almost unfair how good the cliffhanger is because I need the second book now. It comes out soonish. It comes out, I want to say December 20 something, December 26th maybe, which is close, but not close enough. I finished the last sentence of this book and was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? What's going to happen? What are the contents of the second book going to be? Because I need to know. It was fantastic. And again, this book was just so refreshing and such a great book to read. So if you couldn't have guessed, I did give this book 5 stars. I flew through it, loved the characters, loved the pace of the book and the character development and the relationship development. I loved the fantasy aspect of it with the gods and their powers and the reason that they're at war, and I cannot wait to read the second book. You already know that I will be back with a review once that book comes out. Now, I would love to know if you have read this book, what are your thoughts on it? And if you haven't, please read this book. If you enjoy romance and fantasy, please read it and let me know what your thoughts are. I hope that you enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!